Enjoy your time here and find peace in the stories we tell. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to support the channel. Master Lu had just been promoted to a third-rank official in the court. Yet, he immediately sought a marriage alliance with the Marquis Manor for my older sister, Alice Lu. The atmosphere in the manor was suddenly filled with joy. However, my courtyard was the only place without a trace of happiness. This was because the Marquis Manor had proposed marriage to our family before. They came not just once, and not just for the young heir, Caleb Chen, but also for the second young master, Ethan Chen. Caleb was charming, skilled in both literature and martial arts, handsome, and incredibly polite. But the second master, Ethan, was merely a son born of a concubine. He had no chance of inheriting the title and had crippled legs, confined to a wheelchair all year round. He lived a very simple life. Few had seen his true face. Rumors said that he was not only sickly but also temperamental. Noble ladies in the capital city avoided him. I knew well that Master Lu only saw me as an item to be swept along with the current. He did everything to ensure Alice Lu could marry smoothly and happily, spending effort and money to hire matchmakers. As for me, he simply packaged me up and threw me away. But suddenly Madame Lu came to my quiet, deserted courtyard to find me. It was as if she were my real mother. She walked over, held my hand with great sincerity. I know there are many rumors outside, truths and lies mixed together. But do not feel that this marriage is unfair to you. A scholarly family like ours has no strong backing. Your father's position in the court is not high enough. Clinging to such a high-ranking noble house is already very worthwhile for you. Besides, your sister is there too. You can be considered to have someone to look after you. I knew clearly she came to comfort me, to ensure her own daughter's marriage went perfectly, and to warn me not to cause trouble. But I had already thought I would happily accept this marriage, so I nodded and followed her words. Incidentally, I mentioned a request. I wanted to go to the farm estate to pay respects to my late mother. In this manner she had been lonely for a very long time. I understood better than anyone that living a peaceful, sufficient life is much better than marrying for love. After all, a lover's heart can change, but silver and land deeds never change. It seemed my obedient reaction put her in a good mood. She agreed to let me go pay respects to my mother and even praised me for being sensible. When we got married, both Alice and I wore blue wedding dresses, complete with phoenix crowns and shawls. The Marquis Manor did not favor one over the other, just because I was a concubine's daughter. However, Alice's dowry was indeed much more than mine. But Madame Lu also wanted to save face for me. She knew my mother did not leave much wealth for me, so she asked Master Lu to prepare some extra jewelry. Although it was far inferior to Alice's, it was the best the Lu family could offer me. My sedan chair followed behind Alice's, welcomed into the Marquis Manor amidst the noise of gongs and drums. I held a round fan to cover my face. I bowed to heaven and earth with my husband, Ethan, who was sitting in a wheelchair. But I could not help but steal a glance at his face. When I realized I was being too curious, I suddenly felt I was being funny and cute. For so many years, living with the saying only the person under the blanket knows if the blanket has lice, I always thought I was very sober and could see through everything. But I did not expect that on my wedding day. I could not control my consciousness, acting shy like a sheltered noble daughter. Ethan maneuvered the wheelchair to turn and perform the ceremony. Even though he was disabled, he was very agile. However, his expression seemed unhappy. On the wedding day, I had not even seen his face clearly before being sent to the bridal chamber. I faintly heard the bustle and excitement from the main hall. Sophie went into the room with me to wait for my husband. Finally, from outside the door came a click. The door opened. Suddenly, I felt a bit nervous. I hurriedly followed the rules, holding the small fan to cover my face. The elderly maid in the manor had taught me the rules between men and women. She specifically reminded me again and again how to serve Ethan due to his inconvenience. But thinking about what was about to happen, I felt a bit anxious. Sophie was naive and smiling happily. Just as Ethan entered the room, she sensibly went out immediately. My husband sat in the wheelchair, slowly approaching me. But in the end, he stopped at a distance far enough from me. He was silent for a long time, then coldly spoke. "Since you have married into the manor, I naturally will not treat you badly." Having said that, he turned his wheelchair to leave. He turned away, so fast he did not even remove the fan covering my face. When he reached the door, he suddenly looked back at me and said gently, "If one day you want to leave, come find me for a divorce letter." I silently put down the round fan and watched his retreating figure without saying a word. The nuptial wine and the 2 empty cups still sat undisturbed on the tray. It seemed he did not like me. But actually, I did not mind too much. Conversely, I felt strangely relieved. I took off the heavy headdress I had worn all day, looked in the mirror, and removed the wedding dress. At this moment, I felt much more comfortable and relaxed. Then, I noticed the wine jar on the table. For a long time, I wanted to imitate the heroes in books, tasting the wine carried at their waists. But while living in the deep courtyards of the Lu family, I always had to lower my head, cautious in every action and word. Now, it was not easy to finally be my own master for once. Why not let myself loose? The candle in the room was dimming, but my heart felt incredibly bright. Now I would just get drunk. What if I never got another chance to be drunk again? In just a moment, my maid Sophie hurriedly called me softly from outside the door. I was a bit tipsy but still told her to come in. At this moment, I thought, indeed the Marquis's manor was very high class, even the wine smelled better than elsewhere. When Sophie entered and saw me sitting alone drinking, her face looked much more worried. The maid said, "I just saw the second young master go into the detached courtyard, then he did not come out." "What do you mean by this? Could it be that on the very first day, he is already showing his authority over us?" I flipped the wine jar and poured wine into the cup. Although the wine was delicious, it was not very strong for me. This was its only drawback. Seeing Sophie's worried look, I tried to keep a calm expression to reassure her. Water flows without competing to be first. The struggle here is to flow endlessly. It seems Sophie still did not understand. Frowning at me with worry, I turned back and instructed her. "Tomorrow morning, remember to wake me up a bit early." Having said that, I fell into a deep sleep. The next day, Sophie woke me up very early. I changed my clothes and combed my hair, feeling like a gentle married woman. I intended to personally go to the detached courtyard to find my husband, wake him up, and go pay respects to his parents together. But just as I opened the door of the detached courtyard, I saw that he had already bathed and dressed neatly. Since when? I had heard that his birth mother was once the most favored concubine of the Marquis's manor. But she had passed away many years ago. It turned out the Marquis's manor, besides the Marchioness who was the principal wife, had 3 concubines. However, at present, except for Vera who had never given birth, the other 2 concubines were gone. I predicted in my heart that this Marchioness must be an extremely formidable character. Perhaps the days my husband lived through before were not easy. However, no matter how hard it was still better than living in an ordinary poor family. Previously, when I went to the farm estate to pay respects to my mother, I had secretly investigated a few things about my husband. Most of the news related to him was rumors, hard to verify. But some news about the assets he possessed seemed entirely true. The Marquis's manor already had a lot of farmland and shops. Moreover, my husband's birth mother was the daughter of a merchant. Although she was gone, the inheritance she left was not small. Even though my husband now had to sit in a wheelchair, he held many valuable assets in his hands. Even if the family property was divided in the future, the wealth he possessed was enough for him to live luxuriously for a lifetime. Right now, I only wanted to sit firmly in the position of his principal wife. I hoped that if the water was still flowing fast, this would not be too difficult. After all, apart from wealth, my husband had no power. In front of everyone he was just a useless person. No one remembers a person without power. Moreover, he was cold and did not get close to women. Currently, no one was competing for favor with me in his courtyard. So, as long as he did not divorce me, it would be fine. My husband did not want me to help push his wheelchair to pay respects to his parents, but pushed it forward himself. I was not angry, just followed his wish. But when we arrived to pay respects to his parents, I bumped into Alice and her husband. Both of them were smiling radiantly, showing overflowing happiness on their faces. Clearly, yesterday was only their first meeting. Today, they looked so affectionate. I guess the wedding yesterday went very smoothly. I thought perhaps both were very satisfied with each other, to the point I could see they were a perfect match. Their harmony was in complete contrast to us as a couple. One walked ahead, one walked behind. I greeted them together with my husband. Alice was very happy to see me. At the Lu Manor, she was always lively and energetic. Actually, she was not bad to me at all. We followed behind them into the main hall. The Marquis's family did not separate households. Most brothers were married. Inside the main hall, all the elders were seated. My heart was beating very fast. I stepped forward to approach Aunt May. Aunt May asked, "Is the new daughter-in-law inviting me to tea?" In my head, I suddenly thought maybe in a few years, Alice and I would also become like these aunts. Alice's face turned red with shyness. My mother-in-law, Lady Chen, looked gentle and very kind. She smiled and accepted tea from Alice and me. However, after drinking the tea, Lady Chen reached out to Alice and said a few words with deep hidden meaning. But to me, she only said a few simple sentences. After that, my husband and I returned to the detached courtyard. Back there, he did his business, I did mine. No one bothered the other. We lived together very harmoniously. Until 3 days later, we returned to the Lu Manor together, and there I met my sister again. Living in the Marquis's manor for the past 3 days, Sophie reminded me not less than once that I should be a bit friendlier to my husband. After all, in this large estate, a woman without a powerful maternal family backing, without money or power, must rely on the trust and favor of her husband. I said nothing, just spent these 3 days sorting the dowry I brought. I carefully recorded each item and put it into a box. I also secretly calculated the profits from the few plots of land I held in my hand. My mother did not leave me much. She was originally a girl from the countryside, but due to famine, she was sold to the Lu family to be the 7th concubine for Master Lu, with the sole purpose of providing an heir for the Lu family's fortune. These plots of land were the bargains she earned from Master Lu. Before I got married, I went to the farm estate to pay respects to my mother. Arriving there, I remembered the sentence she once said. Water flows without ever competing to be first. The struggle here is to flow endlessly. This sentence she had heard from Master Lu, but it was deeply engraved in her heart and followed her for almost her entire life. My mother never understood any classics, but after becoming a concubine in the Lu Manor, she had the chance to learn to read and write. She also learned quite a few principles of conduct. She exhausted all her strength to fight for a chance for me to study with my brothers and sisters, giving me the chance to learn management along with my sisters from our grandmother. Sometimes, she always asked me to teach her what I had read after I returned. At that time, I thought she really wanted to learn more. But now I understood she just wanted to check if I really remembered what I learned. It was just a pity that my mother ultimately could not give birth to a son. It was precisely because the year she gave birth to me, she was damaged from the roots. This led to her having multiple miscarriages in a row, making her health weaker day by day. Finally, she passed away on a cold winter day. Before dying, she said I was her endlessly flowing stream. At that time, strictly speaking, I could not understand what it was, but I still tried to remember it. When my mother was alive, our courtyard was simple but not deserted. But since she passed away, everything changed completely. The whole courtyard was dyed in a gloomy, desolate color. My stepmother, Madame Lu, although she was generous, she was not meticulous. She did not realize that the wet nurses and maids were people who were obedient on the surface, but rebellious inside. So my days were not very good. Today, returning to the Lu Manor, I did not ask my husband to give me extra face. It was good enough if he just behaved according to the rules of etiquette. I had already guessed that he had trouble walking, so I prepared a carriage and everything to wait for him. But unexpectedly, his legs were much better than what I predicted. He was not completely unable to stand or walk, but just had a leg ailment that prevented him from walking upright perfectly. At this moment, I felt a bit of joy in my heart. I supported him onto the carriage. He sat reading a book inside. As for me, I was silently thinking about my own affairs. I suddenly thought perhaps he was quite competitive. Clearly able to walk, yet insisting on sitting in a wheelchair. Roughly, it was because he wanted to sit upright and solemnly, turning himself into a fool. In front of the Lu Manor, it was extremely lively. Master Lu and Madame Lu had prepared early to welcome us. Inside and outside the manor, countless people crowded and peeked, fearing they would miss a bit of the aura from the Marquis's manor. Alice held her husband's hand and stepped down from the carriage with a radiant smile. My husband finally allowed me to help push his wheelchair. He also knew how to act very well. This was the first time I saw a smile on his face. He looked at me with a very gentle gaze. It really made me very impressed. I originally thought the main characters today were my sister and brother-in-law. But I did not expect my husband to be very good at turning the tables. The relationship between him and his legitimate brother was much better than I thought. At this moment, I realized this husband of mine did not have an imperfect mind like the rumors. On the contrary, he was very proficient in acting lines, calling me affectionately, causing my father, who did not smile casually, to be extremely fond of him. After the banquet, Master Lu insisted on taking my brother-in-law and my husband to appraise the paintings he had just collected. Madame Lu invited Alice and me to talk. Knowing I was not the main character, I just sat there quietly and listened, waiting to answer when Madame Lu asked. My sister and her husband were truly a match made in heaven. While talking, happiness was clearly visible on her face. Even I was a bit moved hearing her speak. When the story shifted to me, I could only say that my husband treated me very well. Madame Lu held both my hand and my sister's hand, telling us to remember to take care of each other to secure a firm standing in the Marquis manor. By doing so, we could also help Master Lu and our brothers back home. Alice seemed to understand this deeply, nodding solemnly. I gently nodded along with her. However, deep down, I knew clearly that if I could secure a prosperous life for myself for the rest of my days, that would be the greatest happiness of all. Upon returning to the Marquis manor, I thought the relationship between my husband and me had softened. So, I attempted to push his wheelchair. However, once again, he rejected my help and wheeled himself forward alone. Days passed peacefully. Ethan paid no attention to me, so I paid no attention to him. The management of the household was not entrusted to our courtyard. Lady Chen handled all matters, big and small. Even so, my courtyard was always kept neat and tidy. Basically, there was nothing for me to worry about. Indeed, my husband kept his word. He never let me suffer regarding food or clothing. However, I always remained frugal, saving some pearls and money so that one day I could build a private farm for myself. I also set my sights on a patch of land in front of the house. I heard that because Ethan disliked flowers, this area had always been left empty and unsightly. Now that I was the mistress here, the servants kept asking me what kind of flowers would be best to plant. Perhaps influenced by my mother, I always liked filling my garden with greenery. However, I felt that planting flowers on this land would be a waste. Therefore, I asked someone to buy cabbage seeds to sow. I tilled the soil myself to sow the seeds and even called Sophie to help. Although it was busy work, I found it very joyful. Occasionally, my husband would pass by the corridor and secretly stop to watch me a few times. He would just stand there observing, shake his head helplessly, and then wheel himself away. Actually, I saw him every time, but since he said nothing and did not stop me, I took it as his tacit approval. I continued my work without paying him any further mind. The empty land was quickly filled with plants. I planned to plant another batch next spring. Peaceful and leisurely days passed by, and I found myself somewhat unaccustomed to such tranquility. I had to find things that interested me. I even invited a teacher to teach me painting, just to give myself something to do. Sophie used to worry that our lives would be very difficult, but she never expected everything to go so smoothly. Because of this, she trusted and obeyed me, eating and playing with me every day. I thought these happy days would last longer. However, unexpectedly Alice, who had never stepped foot in my husband's courtyard before, took the initiative to come to my door. Seeing her distress, I hurriedly invited her inside and dismissed the maids. As soon as she entered, she cried and told me that Caleb's mistress was pregnant, and he wanted to bring her into the manor. Caleb was the heir of a wealthy and prestigious family, so I was not surprised he had a mistress. However, Alice choked back sobs and continued, saying he had not just one mistress, but another who had already given birth to a son who was just turning 2. Moreover, there were countless women from brothels always by his side, too many to count. At that moment, I did not know what to say. She cried again, telling me that she used to feel the Marquis manor was extremely good and her husband made her very satisfied. But now, almost all those feelings turned out to be wrong. Since birth, Alice had always been the pride of our family, loved by our parents, and had never suffered any grievance. However, her mind was too simple. I knew clearly she came to seek my help. Her appearance was not much different from when Madame Lu came to beg me. But I also knew well that in a large family like the Marquis manor, a powerless person like my husband should not interfere in the muddy waters created by the young heir. However, Madame Lu indeed had shown me grace. It was just like the saying, when one person is honored, the whole group is honored, when one suffers, all suffer. I hesitated and thought for a long time, then placed my hand on her back to comfort her. Sister, do not be impatient, I will help you. She looked as if she had grabbed a lifebuoy, her face revealing full gratitude. In this vast Marquis manor, ultimately only you treat me sincerely. I placed my hands over her trembling ones, looking straight into her tear-filled eyes, and asked softly, I am just not clear, sister, do you desire the position of the future mistress of the Marquis manor? Or do you want to capture the heart of the young heir? Hearing these words, Alice seemed a bit hesitant. She stopped crying but could not utter a word for a moment, only asking me what would be the best course of action. Sister, do not be afraid. Take this opportunity to think very carefully for once. I paused for a moment then continued. However, I think that no matter how many times things in this world change, the essence inside can never change. Regardless of whether you want power or a sincere heart, you first need to welcome those two mistresses into the household to care for them. As for the rest, giving them some money and sending them away would be considered the ultimate politeness. Alice continued to show a sad expression, but now both of those mistresses are causing a scene in the manor. And Caleb does not punish them at all, only calling people to bring them back. Even if one day I agree to welcome the two of them and drive the rest away, I am afraid Caleb will not accept this. Naturally, then we can only ask someone else to make the decision for us. I smiled for a moment. Finally, Alice understood a little. She immediately grasped what I meant, and the sorrow between her brows gradually dissipated. Before leaving, she drank a few cups of tea and ate some pastries with me. Before she left, I hugged her tightly. In front of everyone, you absolutely must not mention that you came to find me today. You must definitely treat this as your own idea. After all, this is the time for you to prove your standing in the Marquis's manor. I knew well that only in this way could her position be solidified, and it was also to protect myself. Alice nodded while thinking deeply, stepping out of my courtyard. 2 days later, I heard Sophie say that there was about to be a good show in the Marquis's manor. Just as I thought, Alice had gone to Lady Chen's courtyard to pay her respects. I thought that my mother-in-law must have long known about the mess her son had caused. It turned out that the Marquis's manor requested the imperial court to grant a marriage with the Liu family precisely because they knew a scholarly family like ours always educated their daughters well. Moreover, in terms of social rank, the Liu family and the Marquis's family were far apart. Therefore, no matter what, the Marquis's manor knew we would have to endure the troubles Caleb caused. The Marquis's manor just needed to pretend everything was peaceful until the new daughter-in-law was welcomed in. Even if Alice could not swallow this matter, she had to try to close her eyes and accept it. No matter what, if Alice wanted to maintain her standing in the young heir's courtyard, the best way was to get backing from our mother-in-law. After all, she was the daughter-in-law whom Lady Chen had spent so much effort and energy to bring into the Marquis's manor. Alice did exactly as I said, treating our mother-in-law with both emotion and reason. She said she could be generous enough to tolerate Caleb's two mistresses, but begged Lady Chen to make the decision to discard the other flirtatious women around him. She argued that this was the time for Caleb to build his career, and he could not let any woman distract him. I thought for sure Lady Chen would value Alice even more because of this, as on that day, she kept my sister there to dine with her. Regarding the two mistresses, Lady Chen did not show any intention of helping openly. However, in the quiet, cold windy night, Alice casually ordered people to bring both mistresses and their child into the Marquis's manor through the back door, without any welcoming ceremony. This clearly showed the contempt held for them. As for the two mistresses, perhaps they had somewhat anticipated their status. However, no matter how much they were despised, they had no confidence to resist. It was truly ridiculous. It was said that concubines entering through the back door were no different from servants. Standing beside me, Sophie laughed as she spoke, making me unable to help but laugh along with her. After all, everyone knew clearly that only those who could enter through the front door were truly the masters. In reality, even servants could enter the manor through the side door. Yet, those two had to enter the Marquis's manor through the back door. The back door was a place used only for throwing out trash. This was truly an indescribable insult. If blame must be assigned, they could only blame themselves for having affairs with a man to become mistresses. They were lowering themselves. Being mistresses while impatiently demanding a status for themselves was contrary to moral principles. Still, I told Sophie to prepare a small gift for me, intending to go to Alice's courtyard the next day to see how things were. Sophie hurriedly opened the door to go out and prepare the gift, and at the same time, she saw my husband sitting in his wheelchair, looming in front of the room door. Seeing my husband, the smile Sophie's lips immediately vanished. Realizing the situation, she stepped back behind me. I hurriedly stood up, intending to welcome him in, but he refused and quickly backed away. There will be no next time. He frowned, his face revealing a gloomy expression. He coldly dropped those words, then turned his back and left. Indeed, just as I had guessed, he was not very pleased with my interference in Alice's affairs. But as the dignified second young master of the Marquise Manor, who would stand in a corner eavesdropping on others, watching his figure gradually disappear, I smiled mockingly. No matter what, from the first time he saw me, he had already found me displeasing. I had assumed that my secret interference in Alice's affairs would make him unhappy, so I had hesitated about how to tell him. Although I had told Alice many times not to spread word that everything was my idea. After all, Alice and I were both from the Liu family. Anyone looking in would know that she and I shared the same interests. If I did not step in to help her, it'd be hard to avoid being implicated myself. Up until now, I had never done anything wrong. However, he seemed to dislike me even more. At this moment, I truly felt it would be better to follow what he had said one day. I would just go to him and get the divorce letter. But I had to wait until the day I had accumulated enough strength within the Marquise Manor. Just thinking about that made me feel a bit fortunate and happy. Now, Alice and I were like grasshoppers tie the same string. If I could ensure Alice's power in the Marquise Manor, I could still have a good life. For better or worse, I would receive some care from her. I led Sophie to the front of the young heir's courtyard. In her hands, Sophie held a tray containing 2 bracelets. That was the gift I had prepared for the 2 mistresses who had just been welcomed into the Marquise Manor. They were all people of the Marquise Manor now, so as a sister-in-law, I naturally had to show some gesture. However, I could not give too much, fearing it would cause my mother-in-law and Alice to lose face. So, 1 bracelet for each was just enough. Upon seeing me, Alice was extremely happy and excited, serving tea and receiving me very enthusiastically. After dismissing everyone around, she smiled warmly and said to me, "Last time I really thanked you so much, sister. Now I have received backing from our mother-in-law." But Caleb thinks I begged mother in front of him to help, so that I could welcome those 2 concubines into the manor. Even though mother chased away all his other concubines, he still feels I am extremely generous, and thus he loves me even more. Alice spoke while acting shy, her face full of embarrassment. He is truly much better now, no longer frequenting brothels often, and every night he comes to my room to rest. I vaguely guessed that perhaps Alice had found the answer to the question I raised the last time we met. She truly wanted to hold tight to Caleb's love. I really hope I can give birth to a child soon. It is just that my stomach has not been feeling very comfortable lately. She curled her lips in a gloomy manner. In return, I gave her a bright smile. "Sister, you do not need to worry. Now that the young heir stays in your room every day, pregnancy is only a matter of time. The only question is whether those 2 mistresses will behave themselves after entering the manor." "Perhaps they are still behaving," she replied very calmly. In front of Caleb, I pretend to accept his mistresses. After all, I possess the tolerance of a principal wife. It is just that no matter what, I cannot find them pleasing to the eye. I really cannot understand what makes them more charming than me. Just as she finished speaking, she raised her eyebrows. To be honest, it is ridiculous. Since welcoming them into the manor, Caleb has not bothered to look at them even once. As for the 2 of them, they haven't made any waves either. Hearing her words, I smiled along with her. That is extremely good then. But before leaving the courtyard, I still warned her that she must be very careful with those 2 mistresses in the future. No matter what, people who can cause chaos in the Marquise Manor are naturally extremely tyrannical and vicious. Moreover, now that they have a status, they might behave for a moment, but it is not certain they will remain content for a lifetime. Alice hurriedly nodded upon hearing my words. She turned to me and whispered, "Let us help each other even more." In response to Alice's words, I smiled gently. But as soon as we stepped out of the young heir's courtyard, Sophie was extremely angry, rushing forward. It seemed she had suffered some injustice, as she muttered to me, "Those 2 with unknown backgrounds who just arrived really think of themselves as masters. Do you know what they said today when I brought the bracelets to them?" I hurriedly glanced around, raising my hand to my mouth to signal Sophie to lower her voice so others would not hear. "Do not be rude. Now that they have a status, they are noble people in the young heir's courtyard. Out here, we should not provoke them." I pulled Sophie closer to me. "What did they say? Just whisper it to me. You can rest assured I understand what you mean." In front of them, I was very respectful. But the 2 of them spoke very casually about you without any restraint. They said, Gruely worthy of being a concubine's daughter. Even the gift is so stingy. Sophie seemed a bit hesitant, but finally, she spoke out, looking extremely angry. In fact, I had already anticipated that those two would not be easily satisfied, but I did not expect them to behave and speak so rudely. Doing so in front of my personal maid. Even if my husband had no qualifications to obtain a position in the Marquis's manor, I was still the principal wife of the second young master in this manor. As for concubines who had to enter through the back door like them, they should know their own place. My heart suddenly thought of the words my mother had instructed me, telling me to be cautious in my speech and actions when she was living as a concubine in the Liu family. Indeed, at this moment, my heart could not avoid a twisting pain. But seeing Sophie standing in front of me, wanting to vent her anger for my sake, I felt she was incredibly cute. I reached out and gently rubbed the tip of her nose. All right, my good Sophie, do not be angry anymore. They will have to bear the consequences of everything later on. Having said that, I walked forward. Sophie walked behind me, her face still clearly showing her anger. Why are you never anxious or worried about anything? You are truly too kind. I feel very worried and heartbroken for you. Even so, I could still compose myself, waiting for the good things that lay ahead. The short peaceful days gradually passed. Perhaps those two mistresses were busy giving birth and caring for their children, so Alice's courtyard remained peaceful and without storms. In the final days of the year, the shops I managed were bringing in significant profits. This gave me increasing confidence in a bright future. I could believe that even if I divorced Ethan later, I could still live a peaceful and happy life. The new year was approaching, filling the Marquis's manor with joy inside and out. This was also the first year Alice and I spent together in the manor. Neither of us had yet produced an heir. Still, people from inside and outside the manor came to visit us. Although Lady Chen paid no attention to Caleb's two mistresses, she always cared for her grandson. After all, blood is thicker than water. However, those two mistresses were not permitted to enter the main hall. Therefore, naturally, Alice was the one to carry the child there. The old Marquise and Lady Chen even gave red envelopes to their grandson. The elders in the Marquis's manor were also delighted by the child's presence. After the new year, Alice and I took our husbands back to the Liu manor to offer New Year greetings. Back at the Liu manor, I heard rumors circulating in the imperial court. It was said that the crown prince had passed away a year ago. Currently, the health of the imperial family members was failing. Consequently, there were very few heirs, and a successor had not yet been determined. Another rumor claimed that officials were split. Some supported the second prince, born of a noble consort, while the opposing faction nominated a capable son from the imperial clan to succeed the throne. As for Master Liu, holding a voiceless position, every side posed a danger, so he did not know whom to support. Madame Liu wanted to glean news about the Marquis's manor from Alice and me. She even speculated that the Marquis's manor was bound to face some upheavals soon. However, even Alice did not know the reason behind Madame Liu's assertion. As for Ethan, he remained dedicated to playing the role of a good son-in-law to the Liu family. Upon returning to his own courtyard, he continued to hide away, refusing to meet anyone. As for me, back at the Marquis's manor, I went about my daily routine. However, feeling a bit lazy that day, I asked a servant in the courtyard for assistance. Unexpectedly, the servant secretly reported this to Ethan. Later, they conveyed his message to me, asking why I did not do the work myself as usual, and if I was tired or sick. This confused me greatly, yet I felt a secret joy in my heart. Could it be that he was caring about me? Months gradually passed. I dedicated more time to learning painting and felt myself making some progress. Now, I simply wished for each day to pass peacefully, admiring flowers and painting them. However, a major event occurred in Alice's courtyard. The pregnant mistress was about to give birth. It was only then that I clearly realized the one about to give birth in Alice's courtyard was Sue, while the one who had already given birth was Lana. I had assumed that to provide a male heir, they would fight each other for favor. In that case, Alice would have been the one to benefit from their conflict. Who would have expected that after entering the manor, they would always help each other and live peacefully until today? I had not anticipated that the two of them were much smarter than I thought. The only issue was that, to this day, Alice had not yet achieved her wish of carrying Caleb's child. As for my husband, perhaps because I had been quite well behaved and rarely left the courtyard during this time, on the few occasions I met him, I noticed his expression was somewhat gentler and milder than before. On the day Sue went into labor, The young heir gave full authority to Alice to handle the situation. I knew well that Alice had no experience with childbirth, so there would inevitably be matters she could not handle. Therefore, I decided to go to her courtyard. After all, proving our deep sisterly bond was necessary. Constantly helping each other would only strengthen our relationship. Just as I stepped out of the courtyard, I encountered my husband. I bowed to greet him and informed him that I was heading to his elder brother's courtyard. I told him that Caleb's mistress in Alice's courtyard was about to give birth, and I was going there to see if I could be of any assistance. I assumed he would ignore me as usual and then warn me to mind my own business. However, unexpectedly, he whispered softly to me, "Remember to come back early." Sue eventually gave birth to a baby boy. My brother-in-law rushed in from outside, embracing his newborn son. A single glance was enough to see that the young heir was overflowing with happiness. Lana and her son had been standing guard outside the door to ensure Sue's child was delivered safely. When my brother-in-law carried the baby over for Sue to see, Lana hurriedly led her own son by the hand and followed behind. At a glance, they looked no different from an extremely happy family of 5. Alice, who usually had everything under control, had personally invited the midwife, boiled the water, and even commissioned renowned doctors to prepare rare tonics. Yet now, she stood in the background, cleaning up the mess so diligently that her face looked dark with exhaustion. The scene made it appear as though Alice was very close to that mistress. But in this very moment, she had completely become an outsider. She stood there frozen, unable to leave, yet unable to stay. I could see that witnessing this scene made Alice extremely anxious. Her complexion suddenly turned pale, and she looked incredibly uncomfortable. While no one was paying attention to us, I walked over to Alice, pulled her into a private corner, and gently comforted her. Even if they have sons, it does not matter. You are their legal mother. In the end, they will still have to respectfully call you mother. Honestly, saying these words aloud made even my own heart ache. I had to steel myself just to utter these comforting words. However, Alice replied with intense anger. I know these principles better than anyone. Yet, seeing Caleb so harmonious and happy beside another woman gives my heart an incredibly strange feeling. That night, after helping Alice clean up outside her courtyard, I returned to my own. Upon arrival, I noticed a solitary candle still burning in Ethan's room. He unexpectedly opened the door and wheeled himself toward me. As for Sophie, who had been following right behind me just moments ago, she had vanished in the blink of an eye. Since I married into the Marquis's manor, she had always seized every opportunity to bring my husband and me together. Naturally, I followed etiquette as usual, bowing to my husband. It is late. Is there a reason you are out here? You should be resting early. As soon as I finished speaking, I intended to excuse myself and return to my room to rest. The moonlight was shining into my room. I guessed the sky must be full of stars tonight, so I wanted to come out and gaze at them for a while. His answer did not match my question at all. He was avoiding the point. Moreover, the moonlight was hardly bright enough to shine into the room. Tonight, the moon was just a thin, monotonous sliver of light. Perhaps realizing his mistake, a look of embarrassment crossed his face. He ignored it and asked me, I have something to ask you. Didn't you say you would return early? Childbirth takes a long time. Following my habit, I suppressed the annoyance in my heart and slowly replied to him. In the silence, he did not reply immediately. After a long pause, he turned to me and said, It seems you learned a lot today. Indeed, I learned quite a lot. It is just that, for the time being, I have no opportunity to use this knowledge. As soon as the words left my mouth, I realized I had misspoken. Was life in the Marquis's manor too leisurely, or had sleepiness made me lose my mind to say such things? It is getting late. I will retire to my room now. You should also rest early, husband. I gave a gentle smile and quietly turned to slip away. However, he remained frozen in place, showing no intention of leaving. He just stared at me as if making a determination to tell me something. Suddenly, I felt as though I understood something. I froze in shyness, unable to speak. Could it be that my husband was not sleeping because he was intentionally waiting for me? Did he feel that since his elder brother already had 2 sons, he also wanted to have a child with me? However, the moment that thought crossed my mind, I felt as if I were facing an enemy. But in an instant, I changed my mind. Perhaps this was a good opportunity. If I could have a child with him, maybe the relationship between us would become more comfortable. Moreover, if that happened, my position in the courtyard would be more secure in the future. Who knows, my husband might even share some of his assets with me. Then, I would not need to think about divorce anymore. My husband remained still like this. Did he intend to share a bed with me tonight? I quickly spoke up to ask first. A cough escaped him, as if he were choking on something. You should rest early. Having said that, he hurriedly moved aside to make way for me. For a moment, I was unclear. Had I guessed his intentions wrong? However, guessing the thoughts of a man like him was never an easy task. The next morning, Alice excitedly ran to my courtyard to tell me that Caleb had praised her for handling everything very reasonably. He even affirmed that she was still the only important person in his heart. In the last 10 days, Caleb had stayed with the 2 mistresses for at most 3 or 4 days in total. He spent the rest of his time in Alice's room. This increasingly convinced her that his heart was definitely always with her. I remained silent. I felt that Alice's affection for the young heir was growing deeper than before. However, people always say that outsiders see things more clearly than those involved. Since the day Sue gave birth, I could see that my brother-in-law's feelings for the 2 of them were not fake at all. However, my mother-in-law's attitude remained as clear as the day she allowed them into the manor. Precisely because of this, the young heir understood very well that if he wanted to protect them, he absolutely could not neglect his wife for his concubines. Instead, he could only think of ways to please Alice. Only in this way could he use her name to openly protect the 2 of them, while also keeping his mother satisfied. However, in reality, the backgrounds of those 2 mistresses were entirely unclear and difficult to investigate. I feared that if we only looked at the surface, seeing the young heir's devotion to Alice, we would fail to see the depths within, where perhaps some sinister intent was hidden. I advised Alice that it would be best to send a trustworthy person to keep an eye on those 2 mistresses. Although Alice remained confident in her heart, she agreed with my suggestion. She replied to me with great pride, I have long thought of this. The person who brought them into the manor is my spy. No wonder Alice had been so certain when mentioning the identities of those 2 mistresses before. A thought flashed through my mind, perhaps those 2 mistresses had realized everything all along, which was why they had chosen to remain silent for so long. As for my husband, ever since the night he appeared at my door, we had returned to our old routine of minding our own business, ignoring each other. The spring scenery was truly fresh and beautiful. The cabbage beds had grown rapidly. I ordered someone to harvest the cabbage and bring it to the small kitchen in the courtyard. I also instructed a servant to wrap a portion to take to Alice's courtyard. The spring breeze was warm, gentle and fragrant, perfectly suited for painting and admiring the scenery. I placed a table and chair outside my room, enjoying the breeze while sketching the beautiful spring landscape. A few thoughts crossed my mind. I would have someone press the cabbage seeds into oil, and the residue would be used as fertilizer for the next crop. In the distance, Ethan's close servant gently pushed him out of his room. It seemed he, too, wanted to enjoy the beauty of spring. However, he stopped in front of his door, pretending to focus on a book. I did not understand why, but I felt his gaze constantly turning toward me. An inexplicable sense of peace and tranquility filled my heart. However, I quickly reminded myself that since Alice was no longer thinking clearly, I had to remain as level-headed as possible. It would take quite some time before the next planting season. To keep myself from being too idle, I asked someone to buy fresh apricots to make wine. I remembered a saying the ancients often used, a year's plan starts in spring. Roughly, it means that early planning is the key to success in all endeavors. As for the 2 mistresses in Alice's courtyard, perhaps they also thought the spring days were beautiful and there was much to be done. Therefore, they were preparing to stir up trouble. When my sister hurriedly sent someone to find me, I was busy sealing the lid of an apricot wine jar to take to her courtyard. Seeing me arrive with the jar of apricot wine in hand, she hurriedly dismissed everyone. Then, she whispered in my ear that those 2 mistresses had recently been frequenting the courtyard of Vera, the old marquis's favorite concubine. Although that woman had just given birth, she went there frequently. It seemed her body had recovered very quickly. She added that during the new year, someone had seen the 2 of them sneaking into that courtyard to celebrate with Vera. Alice spoke with a voice full of indignation and anger. Could it be that they have been neglected for so long that they went to ask Vera for advice on how to become a favorite concubine? I reminded Alice that it was best not to criticize or judge the old marquis's concubine, Vera, as she was still an elder. Although no one was around, Alice immediately understood and stopped speaking. Or perhaps I should also go to wish Vera a happy new year. That would make those two understand clearly who the true mistress is and who the lowly servants are. As soon as she finished speaking, I immediately stopped her. I advise her to remain passive and not act rashly. Without discovering what illicit schemes those two mistresses were up to, acting without thinking was out of the question. Suddenly, Alice changed the subject, mentioning that there was still no sign of movement in her belly. Clearly, I have taken many rare tonics. In addition, Caleb still frequently stays in my room, so why, after so long, have I still not been able to conceive? Although I was not an expert on rare tonics, I felt something was strange. However, at that moment, I could only advise Alice to relax. Perhaps a bad mood was affecting her ability to conceive. She turned the question back to me. What about you? Do you and Ethan not want to have children soon? Hearing Alice's words, I felt a bit embarrassed. I hurriedly waved my hand and gave a polite smile, then playfully scolded her for teasing me. However, an indescribable emptiness filled my heart. I was still unsure when, or if, I would divorce him in the future. As for my husband, since he always chose to avoid me, how could we even talk about having children? That day, Alice mentioned the two mistresses visiting Vera for the new year multiple times. I suddenly wondered if she wanted me to go to Vera's place to investigate on her behalf. However, I did not directly to Vera's courtyard. Instead, using the excuse of delivering apricot wine to every courtyard, I took the opportunity to investigate for Alice. I brought a jar of apricot wine to my mother-in-law's courtyard, presenting it to her with extreme politeness. A jar of apricot wine is not worth much, but I made it with my own hands. It contains my sincerity. I hope you will try it in 3 months, and I hope even more that you will like it. My mother-in-law smiled, reached out to accept the wine jar, and said with a touch of admiration, "You are quite a thoughtful person." Before I could leave, she stopped me. "I sent people to the Lu Manor to welcome you along with your sister to marry Ethan. I only hope that I did not cause you any grievance." I was happy to receive this affection from my mother-in-law. I turned back and gave her a happy smile. Thanks to her, my life with Ethan had become a little more beautiful. Then, I returned to my courtyard, fetched another jar of wine, and went to Vera's courtyard. Vera was a person who was always indifferent to everything in the world. However, when she saw me bringing the jar of wine, she was extremely surprised and happy, hurriedly ordering someone to accept it. Vera and I chatted about a few household matters. Everything was very proper, not violating any rules of etiquette. However, it seemed Vera had guessed the reason for my visit. She casually mentioned that the two mistresses from Alice's courtyard had come to her to confide and relieve their sorrow. Not only that, but she also explained to me that those two mistresses knew she enjoyed opera. Since they had some talent, they often came to sing for her. At this point, I was not too concerned about the mistresses. I was just surprised that she would open up so easily and proactively explain everything to me. Moreover, she openly praised those two mistresses, saying they knew how to care for their elders, and she also complimented their singing skills. However, I detected a hint of insinuation about her own choices. She was subtly saying that although they were all concubines, her position was far superior to theirs. Whether what she told me was true or false, I did not care much. I understood that even though she had contributed nothing to the Marquis' manor, she remained the old Marquis's favorite concubine. This proved she was a woman who was very smart about self-preservation. She also realized that Alice's strategy of pleasing my mother-in-law was the correct path. She could not ignore the truth that those two mistresses only treated her warmly because of the young heir. Therefore, she turned to me to subtly dissociate herself from them. I felt somewhat certain that those two mistresses were harboring ill intentions. Thinking that the young heir had lost interest in them, they were quickly seeking help from someone else. However, while guessing was easy, knowing exactly what other plots they were hatching was extremely difficult. As for Vera, she came from a respectable family. There was no reason for her to risk herself for two mistresses of unclear origin by publicly opposing my mother-in-law. If she failed, the risk of losing her peaceful and happy life was very high. It was getting dark. Vera had no intention of keeping me for dinner. She probably feared that if she appeared closer to me than my mother-in-law was, it would lead to criticism. However, she gently reminded me that those two mistresses had recently been mentioning my Aunt May. They said it seemed Aunt May also enjoyed opera. Naturally, I understood the hidden meaning behind her words. I thanked her and took my leave. The very next day, I took a jar of apricot wine from my courtyard and went directly to Aunt May's. Oh my, isn't this my eldest brother's new daughter-in-law? Why do you have time to visit this old woman? Aunt May had always been a straightforward person. I smiled gently and handed her the jar of apricot wine I was holding. She glanced at it briefly, ordered a servant to take it, and then invited me to sit and have tea with her. Nowadays, young people are so leisurely and comfortable, they come to my place every day. Caleb's 2 mistresses come to my courtyard daily to sing and dance. And now, Ethan's wife brings apricot wine to gift me. Although Aunt May's words made me feel somewhat uncomfortable, I knew based on my knowledge of her that she was simply rough and temperamental. In reality, she harbored no schemes or calculations. But thinking back, it is strange. Since when did an old woman like me become so popular and welcomed in the Marquis manor? Having finished speaking, she covered her mouth with her hand and laughed brightly. Aunt May, you are a gentle and kind person, famously so within the Marquis manor. Naturally, everyone is willing to be by your side. I gave a gentle smile and responded to her. I have married into the family for less than a year, so I have always wanted to be closer to the elders in the house. However, I always felt I could not come to pay my respects empty-handed. Yet, I also know clearly that the elders no longer have any interest in rare treasures. Therefore, I wanted to personally make something with all my heart to earn a smile from you. It is currently the season of ripe apricots. I took this opportunity to make these jars of sweet apricot wine. I hope you will be willing to accept this small token of my sincerity. At this moment, I could tell that my words were very pleasing to Aunt May's ears. She even poured tea for me with her own hands. You have a filial heart, that is truly not bad. I also want to say that in this vast Marquis manor, only the affection you invest can win the long-term affection of people in the other courtyards. As she spoke, Aunt May gestured with her hand to indicate the vastness of the manor, making me feel happy enough to let out a soft laugh. Aunt May, you flatter me. My mother-in-law and you say very similar things. I will always remember these words. Both my mother-in-law and you are of imperial lineage in this manor. I intentionally paused for a moment, pretending to be shy. It is just that I never thought both Sue and Lana were so thoughtful. Next time, if there is a chance, I hope my mother-in-law will also be willing to listen to opera. It would be best if she could allow everyone in the manor to hear these wonderful sounds. Aunt May always wore her happiness, sadness, and anger on her face. Sometimes she was a bit clumsy, but nothing proved she was uneducated. Upon hearing me mention my mother-in-law, she immediately rolled her eyes and switched to a tone full of hidden meaning. Those 2 mistresses only know how to hum a few simple tunes. How can they compare with you and Caleb's wife? I smiled because Aunt May was using me to mock them. After a few pleasant exchanges, I stood up and asked to leave. However, unexpectedly, just as Aunt May saw me to the door, we coincidentally encountered the 2 mistresses from Alice's courtyard rushing in. They completely ignored my presence, stepping forward to surround Aunt May, acting as if they were very close to her. Lana was the first to open her mouth, smiling as she spoke. We haven't come to pay respects to you for only 2 days, yet you have already called someone new to relieve your boredom, Aunt May. This really makes us juniors feel jealous. Upon seeing the 2 of them, Aunt May's face quickly turned from pink to pale. After hearing those words, she gave them no face at all. Go away. As concubines, why do you not stay in your husband's courtyard to take care of him, but come to my courtyard every day for what? As soon as she finished speaking, she turned to me and said a sentence as if trying to curry favor with me. I did not invite them here, they came on their own. I do not know what kind of wrong medicine they took. Being conky, they do not take good care of matters in their husband's courtyard, but run to an old woman's place for what? I just glanced at the 2 mistresses, and saw them glaring at me with hatred. As soon as I left Aunt May's courtyard, I immediately sent word to Alice. Hearing the news, she burst into laughter. However, I reminded her to continue being extremely cautious, because right now, we were in the light, but the enemy was in the dark. Even if they could not seek help or backing from anywhere, we actually could not know what plans they ultimately had. So, we should not underestimate them. Moreover, Alice had not been able to conceive until now. A thought suddenly flared in my mind. Could this matter be related to the 2 of them? It was just that, in the current situation, it was best to leave things as they were. It was better for me to return to my courtyard and continue living my leisurely, gentle days. However, my husband once again came to find me in a mysterious manner. It seemed this time he had really made up his mind to tell me something. Even so, When he saw me, he hesitated and could not speak. When he entered the room, I was busy framing the painting, Spring Tour of Flowers, that I had just completed a few days ago. Seeing him slow to speak, and since I was in a good mood, I hurried to speak first. Husband, you just stand there saying nothing. What does this mean? Or have you taken a liking to one of my paintings? I have painted many. I can give you one as a gift. I was extremely generous, hurriedly taking a painting and placing it in his hand. But he, neither fast nor slow, reached into his sleeve, took out something, and placed it in my hand. I looked into his eyes in confusion, then glanced at what he had just placed in my hand. It turned out to be an account book. I once said I would not let you suffer regarding food and clothing. However, I truly do not know what you like. He was awkward, a hint of embarrassment on his face. He paused for a moment then continued. Sophie said you like calculating. Coincidentally, I do not like calculating. So, this can be considered as both of us getting what we like. I glanced briefly at the debt entries inside the book. It turned out everything in the book was written by my husband. His handwriting was extremely elegant. Inside, it contained all the information about the shops his biological mother had left behind. And naturally, he recorded it extremely meticulously, without a single error. I suddenly thought that if he accepted giving me this book, it proved he was gradually willing to accept me. Stopping my train of thought, I felt extremely delighted. I really wanted to ask him to stay and dine with me. However, in just the blink of an eye, he turned his wheelchair and ignored me, wanting to leave again. I did not want to stop him or keep him. I just silently accepted the book he gave. I had not experienced many peaceful days when people from Alice's courtyard came running to find me again. The person who came this time was not Alice's close maid, but a guard in the manor. He arrived with an unfriendly face and a fierce appearance. For a moment, I could not clearly understand what this meant. But just as I turned around, my husband appeared in front of me, an action extremely rare to see. If you want to take her away, then take me along too. Since I entered the manor until now, although usually my husband always showed a cold demeanor towards me and only treated others gently, I did not expect that today he would suddenly be angry. This was also an action I had never seen before. Actually, from the moment those guards stepped in, I knew clearly it was nothing good. Therefore, I had already prepared myself mentally. After all, from childhood to adulthood, it was not that I had never suffered injustice, but this was the first time in my life someone stood in front to protect me. Although veins were popping out on my husband's forehead due to anger, at this moment, I could not understand why I felt he was strangely warm. My husband and I were taken to Alice's room. Sitting at the highest position inside the room was the young hare. Alice was also sitting beside Caleb, the expression on her face revealing clear anger. As for the two mistresses, because of their status, they could not sit on the same level as Alice and the young hare, but could only sit behind with an appearance no different from the servants in the house. The young hare ordered someone to bring up the jar of apricot wine I had gifted Alice a few days ago. More accurately, it was not yet the appropriate time to drink it, but the seal I placed before had been removed. Your gall is truly big. Even your own sister, you envy and are jealous of. If Sue and Lana were not cautious and meticulous, I really would not have known your disgusting wickedness. I was made confused and bewildered by his words, unable to clearly understand the situation. Look for yourself, you mixed something into this wine jar. This is the scent of medicine used for contraception. Moreover, you dared to tell your sister to specially place it hidden inside her room. It is true that one cannot foresee your unpredictable insidiousness. No wonder your sister has found it so difficult to conceive. In my heart, I suddenly felt something humorous. I could only offer a cold smile. I really did not expect that after a period of suppression, those two mistresses would resort to such stupid tricks. My husband beside me had now almost completely changed his character. Once again, he stepped forward to protect me. I reached out to gently pull his sleeve down and signaled to him that I could handle it myself. After composing myself, I opened my mouth to speak. It is not wrong that I personally made this apricot wine. But at the time I brought the wine to this place, only Alice and I were present. I venture to ask, how do these two mistresses know everything so clearly? At this moment, a few rays of wariness appeared on the faces of the two mistresses, especially Sue, who had just given birth not long ago. Her face was filled with discomfort. However, the young hare continued to be aggressive and threatening. This apricot wine was hidden by your sister like a treasure in a secret corner of her room. Lana and Sue also live in this house, so why would they not know? When I made this apricot wine, every empty jar was washed and sterilized carefully by me. Furthermore, there was a seal on top. Not only that, the mouth of the jar was wrapped with a layer of hard paper on the outside, and the outermost layer had an additional layer of beeswax. I venture to ask my brother-in-law one question. How could the contraceptive medicine you mentioned get inside when the jar's mouth was sealed so tightly by me? The young hare still spoke eloquently, his words becoming increasingly unpleasant. How do I know you did not intentionally swap the thing you brought to gift your sister? I had not yet had time to open my mouth to retort when down below. Sophie could not suppress her anger and ran forward. A sound rang out as Sophie knelt on the ground, shouting loudly. This servant can prove it, because when the mistress made this apricot wine, this servant was always by her side. The mistress absolutely never did anything bad inside the apricot wine jar. The young hare laughed loudly, full of sarcasm. Truly ridiculous. The affairs of masters, yet a servant like you dares to interfere. You are her person, naturally, you must speak in her favor. I walked over to help Sophie stand up. Personally, I felt no fear whatsoever. Before my eyes, the jar's mouth was sealed tight by me. It is certain that it was opened. You say there is no evidence. How do I know clearly that before this? Some person with a wicked heart did not open it and put unclean things inside to frame me. In that moment, the young hare seemed to have no reaction, only pointing at me with a face full of anger, but now he was so angry he could not utter a word. You are truly a woman with a sharp tongue. Finally, my husband could not bear it anymore. He stepped forward, pulled me behind him to protect me. He has always been a man of few words, but now he spoke very eloquently. I still hope elder brother calms down first. I always follow principles and respect elder brother. But right now, there is not a single piece of evidence proving my wife has committed a mistake. Just because of a tiny suspicion, blowing the matter up like this is a bit too much. Inherently, all matters in this house are decided by Mother. I think we should take all the evidence here to Mother and let her make the decision. After all, Mother is someone who knows how to punish the right person. Mother is someone who always has a lot of experience in solving all problems. At the same time, I gently turned to glance at the faces of the two mistresses. They now looked extremely unsightly. If someone in my courtyard makes a mistake, I will certainly never forgive them. But if someone in elder brother's courtyard makes a mistake, I also hope that when the time comes, elder brother will not try to cover up or gloss over his own errors. Every word my husband spoke was full of spirit and extremely powerful. I originally thought the young hare would unreasonably suppress my husband, but unexpectedly, he did not get any angrier. Instead, he tried to smooth everything over. It seemed he did not want to bring this matter to create chaos at my mother-in-law's place. Instead, he casually stated a reason to excuse it, saying that a servant had stolen the wine jar and put medicine in it to harm Alice. Everyone present knew clearly that this was not the truth. Finally, I realized that the young hare had long seen that it was the two mistresses, so he clumsily shifted the blame to another person. He was just intentionally favoring those two mistresses. He also wanted to use this opportunity to cause a rift between Alice and me, and additionally, to take advantage of this time to ruin Alice's reputation. I did not know what Alice was thinking, but I felt she was much smarter than me. She would definitely understand the deep implications within this matter. It was just that up to this point, was she still willing to continue with this kind of affection from the young hare? As for my husband, he was so angry he became dizzy. He suddenly stood up from the wheelchair, held onto his crutch, pulled me close to his side, and protected me. He took me back to our courtyard. Entering the room, after letting me settle down, he turned his back, wanting to go out. I do not know where I got the courage, but suddenly I became so proactive. Before he could turn to leave, he suddenly hugged me tightly from behind. He was suddenly radiantly happy. He had just turned to leave a moment ago, but came back to hug me tightly in his arms. Sophie's expression at this moment was as if she had finally fulfilled her wish, and then she happily left. Just right. Why are you suddenly so good to me? I raised my head and immediately met his eyes full of love. Because you are the wife I married properly and legally. He spoke those words to me as if affirming something extremely obvious. But wasn't it that from the beginning? You did not find me pleasing to the eye. Letting out that sentence, I suddenly discovered a feeling of discomfort in my heart. Nonsense. The first time I met you, I was extremely satisfied. It was just that I was afraid I would make you miss out on your youth. After a moment of silence, lowering his voice, he continued. But gradually afterwards, you no longer paid attention to me. At that time, I thought you were no different from other women out there, all disliking the disability in my legs. I just did not expect that you would persist in staying in this courtyard for so long. But clearly, on our wedding night, you turned your back and abandoned me. I pursed my lips, acting a bit coquettish. But I did that, and you did not call me back. He also frowned, blaming me. However, he then warned me that there would be no next time. This was because he feared that my helping their courtyard clear the mud from the water was a futile effort. He asked, if you had known earlier that this would happen, tell me, what would you have done? I retorted, but clearly I handled it very reasonably. He shot back, and you dare say that? Today I even had to help you until I was covered in sweat. Neither of us seemed willing to yield. We just looked at each other for a long moment, then both burst into laughter. That night, he stayed in my room. I felt a mix of anxiety and impatience in my heart. The lessons the elderly maid in the manor had taught me before the wedding flashed through my mind. Since I had never put them into practice, it seemed I had forgotten every word. In truth, however, what she taught was basically useless. Although Ethan had a disability in his legs, it was not actually a serious hindrance. He was perfectly compatible with me. Finally, we were truly together. My husband and I spent peaceful days in our courtyard. I only heard that a few arguments and commotions had occurred in the young heir's quarters. Perhaps Caleb thought these were minor matters, so he settled everything quietly. However, he failed to consider that in my mother-in-law's eyes, this was a major domestic issue. Even though he wanted to hide it, he could not conceal it from her. I do not know where Lady Chen received the news or the full details, but she investigated the origin of the story from beginning to end. However, she did not come to find me at all. Instead, she only sent people to search the rooms of those two mistresses. In truth, it would have been fine without an investigation. But the investigation revealed wine in their room, and it was discovered that a substance had been mixed into it. The only twist was that the target the two mistresses aimed at was not Alice, but my brother-in-law. They had mixed a drug that destroys a man's seed into the wine jar. If my brother-in-law drank this tainted wine for a long time, naturally, he would never be able to get Alice pregnant. Upon hearing this news, Sue, who had just given birth, was immediately terrified. She collapsed to the ground, crawling in the darkness like an animal. She tried to pin all the blame on Lana, but Lana was a person who always knew how to scheme. She immediately made excuses, claiming that Sue had gone mad and committed evil acts, only to frame someone else. Now, seeing this scene, I realized that these two, who usually embraced and protected each other, turned their backs on one another the moment their interests were threatened. The good sisters who were once inseparable had turned into dogs biting each other, fighting for their own survival. In the end, both fell into a state of mutual destruction. Not only that, but my mother-in-law also stripped them of the right to raise their own sons. She took the two children and sent them to Alice's courtyard. Because the young heir personally pleaded for them, Lady Chen only confined the two mistresses rather than physically harming them. As for Alice, the clouds finally parted to reveal the moon. And naturally, good things often come in pairs. The joy finally arrived. Alice was pregnant. A spirit of positivity, optimism, and persistence never gave up. A few days later, Sue, who was always seen as a coward, went completely mad. When the young heir secretly visited her, she physically attacked him. She even became so deranged that she ran outside, claiming that everything she did was at my instigation. Naturally, no one believed her words. And just like that, she was thrown out of the Marquis's manor through the back door. Only Lana remained on the other side. She was smart enough to stay hidden, daring not to show her face within the house. After the relationship between my husband and me gradually became harmonious, I discovered that he was also extremely interested in planting vegetables and raising fish. He was a noble young master born into an aristocratic family, yet he set his eyes on someone who worked with soil and mud like me. This made me even bolder than before. I directly turned my courtyard into a green vegetable garden. His legs were still weak, and he could not walk easily on his own, so he just sat in one place calculating the spacing of the land in the courtyard, arranging everything in an orderly manner. Moreover, he even called his closest young servant to help Sophie and me. Our courtyard finally became harmonious and beautiful. Looking at the lush green garden we had just completed, my husband and I sat side by side in the corridor to admire it. I turned my head and gently asked him, Husband, have you ever calculated or thought about the future? He paused for a moment, then gently replied, I only think about the present life. As soon as he finished speaking, he acted as if he had just teased me, reaching out to gently rub my head. Since when did the ice-cold second young master of the Marquis Manor have such a cheerful face? It seemed I increasingly wanted to place him at the tip of my heart. Conversely, what about you? If you hadn't married me, what would you have planned for the future? I pursed my lips and answered him. I am just an ordinary woman. If I had not married you, I probably would have listened to my parents and married another man, living peacefully in a courtyard somewhere for the rest of my life. Marrying another man. Would you be willing? Seeing his jealousy turn into anger, I involuntarily burst into laughter. No, I mean if you were not bound by the rules forced by parents, would you intend to sincerely do something for yourself? I fell silent for a while, thinking deeply before meeting his affectionate gaze. Naturally, yes. I stood up gently and took slow steps forward. It is just that when my birth mother was alive, she often said water flows without competing to be first, and she also instructed that I am her flow. Therefore, I always believe that the things I truly want to do should be placed in the first position. And after that, I will do them little by little, slowly, and never stop. Seeing he had no intention of replying, I continued on my own. However, if you sincerely ask what I want to do, actually, I have no ambition to aim for. Roughly, it is to clear a piece of land in the countryside to care for, or open a shop. That would be better than living in a deep courtyard within a large mansion, only to live a cramped life forever. I turned back to look at him. I saw him sitting in the wheelchair with his eyes wide open. Then just keep doing it. I will always be behind you. I am willing to be your endless stream for a lifetime. Finally, he completely opened his heart to me. He also told me a few things about his birth mother, and revealed his ambitions. But he sadly said they would never be realized because of his disability. Hearing those words, my heart tightened. I used my palm to cover the back of his hand. However, he held my hand tightly. Previously, in the Marquis Manor, there was no rule about moving out. But I am willing to open a stream with you, to have a private, carefree life. Having said that, he smiled, his eyes crinkling. I widened my eyes in surprise. When that time comes, we will choose the 4 directions as our home. Whatever you want to do, I will be by your side to accompany you. I saw the determination in his eyes and finally nodded vigorously, agreeing with him. The afternoon sunlight was gentle and warm, casting a golden glow on his back as the evening breeze blew softly. I was still thinking about the good days ahead when the situation outside suddenly changed rapidly. The emperor passed away. The second prince ascended the throne. It was just as Madame Lu had told me last time about the Lu family. The second prince could not completely convince all the court officials. He was born ignorant by nature. He only obtained the throne because his mother, the noble consort, received favor and ruled from behind the curtain. However, the second prince's good imperial uncle, Prince Jing, seized that opportunity to rise up in rebellion. Using the banner of expressing remembrance for the late crown prince, he affirmed that the second prince was unworthy of this position. He used that reason to launch an uprising against the imperial court. Everything fell into ups and downs. For a moment, I could not make a decision on when to leave the Marquis Manor to live our private life. Therefore, I went to find my husband to discuss it. As expected, his thoughts and mine matched perfectly. The current situation was still unclear. Naturally, we had to put the interests of the Marquis Manor first. But something neither of us expected happened. The old Marquis suddenly became so angry that he vomited blood and passed away. The entire Marquis Manor was shrouded in mourning and white sorrow. Immediately, the imperial court issued a decree ordering Caleb to mobilize to the front lines to support the new emperor against Prince Jing, who had already captured several citadels. Unlike expectations, the young heir did not shrink back but directly accepted the order. However, holding her growing belly, Alice came to my courtyard crying. I had assumed that once the 2 mistresses were removed, she could live a peaceful life with Caleb. But now, everything had changed too quickly. The child in my belly cannot be born without a father. Sister, tell me, what is the right thing to do? She seemed to have no mind left to talk, just standing there crying like a child. I gently patted her shoulder to comfort her. No matter what, you must protect the child in your womb well. This is a critical and dangerous time. The young heir is outside facing life and death. We cannot let any mistakes happen in the courtyard. However, someone in the manor refused to sit still. The mistress, who was sane and not mad, Lana, foresaw the unrest. In the middle of the night she manipulated the guard watching her. She secretly gave him some money and sneaked out through the back door. In a short time, false rumors spread everywhere, putting everyone in the Marquis's manor in danger. Servants took turns discussing, predicting that the Marquis's manor was about to collapse completely. Then strange things kept happening. My mother-in-law, who was healthy, suddenly fell ill. She was so sick she could not stand up. All the elders in the house gathered to discuss temporary countermeasures, but for the moment, no perfect solution could be found. The situation became increasingly chaotic. The Marquis's manor was on the verge of losing the glory and prestige of the entire clan. It was then that I suddenly realized clearly that the old Marquis and my mother-in-law had built this manor with their own strength. My husband and I were trying to think of a way to solve the chaotic situation before us. The best thing was to protect my mother-in-law's health. Only then could we grasp the chaotic situation. Finally, Vera and Aunt May were assigned the task of taking turns guarding Lady Chen. Now, all authority in the house, previously in my mother-in-law's hands, was completely handed over to Alice. The Marquis's manor was in chaos and confusion, and outside, the Lu family could not sit still either. Master Lu sent a letter to Alice, asking how to respond to the situation. Receiving the question from our father, Alice became even more panicked. She wished she could move to my courtyard to live with my husband and me. I calculated a plan to help her. On one hand, I appointed a few close people to maintain communication between the Marquis's manor and the Lu manor, which also served to reassure Madame Lu and Master Lu. On the other hand, I calmly monitored the situation and prepared for Alice's delivery. The weather had turned to autumn, becoming cooler. The Marquis's manor, though carrying a heavy burden, was still expecting good news from Alice. Before the family's expectation, Alice finally gave birth to a baby boy. Everyone in the manor was excited, as there was now a new heir. However, I felt that besides that, I was happier for Alice herself. Out there, Prince Jing had attacked all the way to the capital. Although my brother-in-law led the army to fight back with all his might, he was seriously injured and had to retreat to the camp. As for the soldiers who went to the front line, except for those who had died, the rest turned around to submit to Prince Jing. It turned out that before my brother-in-law suffered a disastrous defeat, Prince Jing had coordinated with internal traitors. The relatives of the soldiers were taken to a safe place. This policy won the hearts of the people. Therefore, everyone deserted the front line, standing completely on Prince Jing's side. Only my brother-in-law remained, leading the few remaining soldiers to fight. On the day my brother-in-law was carried back to the Marquis's manor, Madame Lu, who had just recovered a little, suddenly fainted again. Alice was still in her confinement period, but upon hearing the news, she hurriedly got up and walked to the door to welcome him. I just stood quietly beside my husband, observing Alice's deep affection for him. Now I understood the saying, distance tests a horse's strength, time reveals a person's heart. When my brother-in-law was brought back, we realized that Lana, who once swore eternal love, had taken all the money and secretly fled the Marquis's manor. In the end, only Alice, the wife my mother-in-law had wholeheartedly brought in, was truly sincere to him. Finally, I saw the young hare hold Alice's hand and whisper, "From now on, in my heart, there will only be you." At this moment, everyone could see Alice's tear-streaked face, tears of ultimate happiness. Finally, she had achieved what she desired. However, at this moment, the situation outside became increasingly critical. Only the capital remained unoccupied. Although the new emperor was panicked, he got into a dispute with his own mother. In the end, he killed his own mother by poisoning her in an extremely brutal manner. Now, there was no one left to advise him. He only knew that in the capital, only the Marquis's manor remained indifferent. He was truly an ungrateful person. At night, he sent the Imperial Guard to surround the entire Marquis's manor. Everyone in the manor became hostages. He issued a military order, forcing my husband, who had a disability in his legs, to replace his elder brother as the commander-in-chief to preserve the regime for him. A military order is a bond of life and death. Failure offers no escape. My husband was also ready to sacrifice his life in this moment of danger. On the night he received the order to become commander-in-chief, he held my hand and talked all night long. Danger was everywhere before our eyes. The Marquis's manor probably no longer had the ability to preserve itself. "If you want to leave now, I will definitely use all my strength to protect you and get you out safely." I froze, looking at him blankly. "What about you?" We both knew very well that the remaining power of the new emperor had no way to overcome his opponent, Prince Jing. Everyone knew that compared to the scheming Prince Jing, the second prince was weak and incompetent. Now, everyone thought that perhaps Prince Jing was the wise ruler who was shrewd and far-sighted. Currently, the entire Marquis Manor was being threatened by the new emperor. Perhaps the remaining soldiers were also being forced to fight to the death. In reality, appointing my husband as the commander-in-chief was pushing him onto the path of death. At this moment my husband looked at me with red, tear-filled eyes containing a helpless hope. There are no jokes in the army. Since the military order has been issued, even if I do not want to accept it, I must. At this moment, I suddenly felt I had gained a bit more courage. I immediately made up my mind, willing to face all difficulties with my husband. The current times fell into chaos. My husband and I, who thought our lives were insignificant, were pushed together by the turbulent waves of the times. As for the people in the capital, suffering through fire and water, their hardships were now commonplace. In such circumstances, how could I only think of myself? How could the phrase, "flowing slowly," be used in this case? Everything in the Marquis Manor was extremely difficult to overcome. The person I previously sent to maintain contact between the Lu Manor and the Marquis Manor could no longer deliver news. Alice, not yet finished with her confinement, was busy personally caring for her husband. Outwardly, she managed the house, but in reality, I was the one handling everything. My husband had been taken to the military camp, but at this time, my mother-in-law called me to see her. It turned out her heart was like a mirror, seeing through everything. She knew I had always been plotting to help Alice, but this was the first time I saw her in such an intensely emotional state. Good child, this Marquis Manor truly owes you. Actually, Ethan's disability was not from birth. At the age of 15, when he followed the late emperor to the hunting grounds with the children of generals, he was injured saving the late emperor. As she spoke, tears streamed down her gaunt face. She looked truly heartbreaking. The Marquis Manor never intended for family members to live apart. However, as the family's prestige grew, the expenses increased. The Marquis married his son's birth mother to improve the finances, but it could not stop the increasing loneliness of each person in the manor. Although I gave birth to Caleb, I knew from the start that Ethan was better than him in everything, whether martial arts or knowledge. But because Caleb was the legitimate son, on that hunting trip, he had to go with the descendants of other imperial families. Telling this, my mother-in-law became even more emotional. That day, it wasn't that Caleb intentionally didn't help Ethan. It was just that seeing a large tiger losing control, everyone present was too scared to step forward and retreated. This gave Ethan, who was hunting with the former crown prince, the courage to rush in. But by the time he took down the tiger, his legs were soaked in blood. The animals in the hunting ground were tamed beforehand. I really do not understand why they became so fierce for no reason. No matter what, Ethan is truly a good child. His legs could actually have been completely cured, but he stubbornly refused treatment, causing the issues with his legs to worsen day by day, until he was finally confined to a wheelchair. Although Ethan kept everything inside and never said a word to anyone, I knew clearly that he was intentionally reminding the imperial family at all times to remember the good deeds the people of this Marquis Manor had done for them. But to this day, the imperial family has not only failed to recognize the Marquis Manor's kindness but also wants to repay grace with enmity. In my heart, I have always viewed Ethan as my own son, but I never thought there would come a day when he would go to the battlefield for the sake of the Marquis Manor and Caleb. Good child, do not blame me. Lady Chen's mood was unstable and erratic. After everything happened, she suddenly coughed violently. I immediately called for someone to bring some tea to help soothe her throat and reduce the severe coughing fits. As I handed her the water, I gently patted her back. She had always been seen as an intelligent and capable woman. Looking at her thin, frail back at that moment, I realized I had never imagined she could lose weight so quickly. I looked up at her face, filled with wrinkles and lines, every crow's foot a testament to the effort she poured into building this manor. Even when she fell asleep, her mouth still muttered something. The entire Marquis Manor owes Ethan. Since the relationship between my husband and me improved, I confided in him often. But I never asked about the other reasons why he could not fulfill his ambitions. Outside, rumors about my husband grew daily. But naturally, the secrets of the imperial family were always kept hidden, preventing them from spreading. In my heart, I felt aggrieved for my husband. After all these years, what exactly had he endured to continue living like this? I realized that my identity and family status would surely trap him in my life until the end of his days. Speaking of this, I suddenly missed my husband even more. At this moment, I realized that no matter the outcome, I was willing to overcome it with him. I summoned the leader of the Imperial Guard surrounding the Marquis's manor to ask for his opinion, stating that I wanted to go to the military camp to be with my husband. He did not say much, only telling me that I had to ask for a decree from the new emperor. The new emperor was a man who was greedy for life and afraid of death. He always wished for everyone to sacrifice their lives for him. Therefore, he immediately agreed to my request, with the condition that the Imperial Guard must personally escort me to my husband's camp. The day before my departure, my mother-in-law called me to her again. Her eyes held a hint of reluctance. She kept repeating on her lips that she regretted it, feeling that the person Caleb should have married back then should have been me. I sighed softly, unable to understand what my mother-in-law meant, so I simply accepted it in silence and did not reply. I bowed solemnly to thank her. I thanked her for giving me the opportunity to meet the best husband in the world. Stepping out of the large gate of the Marquis' manor, I suddenly saw that the entire capital was now just a pile of ruins. All the shops in the capital were either under control or smashed to pieces, with nothing left. As for the people in the capital, anyone who could run was trying their best to flee the city before the gates were completely closed. In the vague blur, I suddenly heard that in less than a few hours, Prince Jing would likely lead his entire army to attack deep into this ruined capital. At that moment, from a distance, I suddenly saw the faint figure of my husband. His face was pale as he gradually approached me. Not much time had passed, yet life had gone through so many ups and downs. Seeing me, although surprised, he was not shocked. "Why did you come here? Don't you know the current situation is completely disadvantageous?" He spoke with extreme anger. I said nothing, only walked gently towards him and held his hand tightly. Before coming here, I already knew clearly that he and the leader of the Imperial Guard were old acquaintances. Although they now had to obey the new emperor's orders, they were still sober people who could distinguish right from wrong. Before leaving the Marquis' manor, my husband had also spoken with that person. Even if he used all his strength, he still could not hold this city. Please stay at the Marquis' manor for another hour. However, I did not expect that my husband had actually calculated the plan carefully beforehand. Basically, it was not to stand forever to protect the city, but to open the city gates wide to welcome the new army. Terrible thoughts kept appearing in my heart. In my husband's military camp, I always followed the rules strictly, but I also had to be cautious and careful. He had always been a shining mirror in my heart. Secret intelligence reported that Prince Jing was less than 10 miles from the capital. I understood clearly that perhaps the time had come. That night, my husband and I could not sleep at all. I intentionally put on a bright and radiant appearance, pretending to be calm as I spoke a few words to him. "Husband, you once said that you had not yet been able to realize your ambitions. Although we are now falling into a crisis, this is the time for you to fulfill the ambitions you have been nurturing." He was silent for a moment, then smiled, nodded slightly, and said, "Yes, that is true." Having said that, he hugged me tightly. I suddenly felt overflowing happiness, but I did not understand why my eyes felt stingingly hot. I held back, not letting the tears fall, burying my head in his warm embrace. No matter what his plan was, I would use all the strength I had to help him. Even if it meant jumping into boiling water or burning fire, I would not shrink back. The next day, I saw him standing alone on the city wall. I could only stand from afar, looking at him for the last time. Prince Jing's 100,000 cavalry were advancing from the distance with raging momentum. At the end of the horizon, black clouds gathered, threatening to destroy the entire capital. The city gates were completely closed. Prince Jing's army was gradually advancing inward. Seeing my husband standing alone on the city wall, Prince Jing burst into wild laughter. "My ignorant nephew, he is so stupid that he sent a cripple to protect the capital." The Great War was about to break out. From a distance, I only saw my husband trembling, trying to stand up from his wheelchair, shouting loudly in response to Pring's insane laughter below the city wall. "Dare I ask, Prince Jing, Your Highness, if you obtain this world, do you dare to guarantee impartiality, sacrificing yourself wholeheartedly for the world, taking the world as your responsibility? Do you view the suffering of the common people as your own suffering?" Prince Jing indeed despised my husband greatly, but he still shouted his reply. That is natural. You do not need to worry about that. Today, I am willing to open the city gates wide to welcome a new king into the city, but I only welcome a wise ruler who is wholeheartedly devoted to the common people." Hearing these words, Prince Jing's face clearly showed disdain, but at the same time, a few doubts flashed in his mind. My husband continued to speak calmly and composedly. "Prince Jing may not believe me. It is just that if the main general is dead, the result will certainly be decided. This city gate, without even needing a fight, will be completely defeated. What do you think about what I said?" The hare standing beside Prince Jing suddenly spoke up. After receiving the military pledge, a general naturally cannot disobey orders. Now he only wishes to sacrifice his body for the country. Standing far away, I could hear my husband's decisive voice. In my heart, I suddenly understood clearly that the outcome had indeed been predetermined. It is just that this general has a request, perhaps a bit excessive. I pray that Prince Jing, Your Highness, can grant this grace. This general wants to exchange his life for the assurance that after Your Highness enters the city, you will protect the common people to live in peace, and protect the Marquis's manor to remain safe. Silence engulfed the surroundings on all four sides. Only the sound of horses neighing remained. I looked carefully at my husband standing alone on the high city wall. His back was thin but incredibly steadfast. I did not know when tears had soaked both my cheeks. He suddenly looked down at me. His eyes were red, filled with regret and reluctance. It seemed this was the final farewell he reserved for me. I knew clearly that I could not continue with him in this separation. I had to return to the Marquis's manor to fulfill his final wishes in his place. Immediately, he stood up and jumped off the city wall. My tears gushed out uncontrollably. It seemed I had gone mad. I rushed quickly towards the city wall, my weak legs trying to drag each exhausted step towards my husband. Seeing the scene of him slowly falling, I screamed and laughed loudly at the same time. After all, Prince Jing was a gentleman who knew how to find and use talent. The air beside Prince Jing was indeed quick-eyed and quick-handed, galloping his horse forward to successfully save my husband. Immediately, the city gates opened wide to welcome the new wise ruler entering the city. At this moment, everyone in the Marquis's manor was anxiously waiting for the return of my husband and me. The leader of the Imperial Guard kept his promise. Even though the capital was attacked, he did not lay a hand on the Marquis's manor. And Prince Jing also kept his word. After entering the city, he quickly sent people to rescue the Marquis's manor before marching straight into the Imperial Palace. It turned out that when Caleb was seriously injured and brought back, he and my husband had long been of one mind. My husband would protect the outside, and the young heir would use his remaining power to protect the inside. Thus, even if the leader of the Imperial Guard betrayed his promise, the Marquis's manor would not fall into danger. Upon entering the Marquis's manor, my husband was surrounded by many people. A moment later, he sighed in relief, leaned on my shoulder, and collapsed. Everyone in the Marquis's manor immediately went to find a doctor, quickly leading him straight to my courtyard. Fortunately, when my husband jumped from the city wall, the hare had rescued him in time. Temporarily, my husband's life was not in danger. It was just that jumping from such a high wall, he was still slightly injured. At this time, I heard rumors that Prince Jing had finally entered the Imperial Palace and reclaimed the throne. The newly deposed emperor could only collapse, kneeling on the ground, begging his imperial uncle to spare his life. Inherently, he only wanted to live and did not seek power. It was only because of his mother's coercion that he fell into his current path. But now, his mother had died by his hand. Now he could only kneel and beg his imperial uncle for leniency. Finally, Prince Jing ascended the throne. As for the second prince, he was confined in a detached villa. This could also be considered a blessing in disguise. In that villa, he enjoyed pleasure, or to put it nicely, sang and rejoiced every day. To put it harshly, he was resigned to his fate and waiting for death. As for my husband, an exception was made for him to become a high-ranking official, leading the court officials. I thought that his great ambition could finally be fulfilled. Attending court immediately after his wounds healed, my husband firmly decided that he no longer needed to sit in a wheelchair. From now on, he would use a cane and attend court every day, determined to help the upright families within the imperial clan. The Marquis's manor was gradually regaining its former prosperity. The health of my mother-in-law and brother-in-law was also gradually recovering. As for the Liu family, Master Liu had always hoped Alice could help him with some advice. But unexpectedly, in the end, it was my husband who acted as an excellent stepping stone, helping his father, in-law get promoted. After returning to the Marquis's manor, I took some time to go pay respects to my mother. It had been a long time since I looked at her spirit tablet. To be honest, I did not know whether to be happy or sad. I hesitated for a moment before turning to her tablet. Mother, tell me, is this like what you used to say about flowing endlessly? Deep down, I truly knew that I would never receive any answer from her. Caleb's injuries had completely healed, and he returned to the court. My husband's affairs in the court were also going smoothly, like a kite meeting the wind. Whether with the former crown prince or the current crown prince, they all had very good relationships. He gradually became a capable right-hand man for the imperial family. As for matters within the Marquis's manor, they were also getting better. My mother-in-law's health improved day by day. She handed over the management of everything in the Marquis's manor to Alice. Originally, my mother-in-law had called me, wanting me to manage the household together with Alice. But I did not want to do that, so I gently declined her offer. After all that time and the events that had occurred, Alice was no longer indecisive. She had matured much more than before. Whether it was managing the house or caring for children, she was proficient and completed everything very well. As for me, I remained in my courtyard, living leisurely days planting vegetables and raising fish. Occasionally, vague thoughts of going far away appeared in my mind. Sophie was always by my side, treating me sincerely. She always advised me to think carefully. But this time, I had decided to leave. I wanted Sophie to find a good family, a place to entrust herself. But she resolutely refused to marry, wanting only to serve by my side for a lifetime. In the end, I could not sway her, so I had to give in. I did not know how to tell my husband. But after all, this thought also stemmed from his encouragement. However, it seemed he had seen through my thoughts. With a smile on his lips, he turned to me and said, "Just be bold and do the things you want. I will always be behind you, your solid rear guard. Wait until the day I succeed. I will definitely run very fast to find you." Finally, I said goodbye to the Marquis's manor and Alice. Together with Sophie, I stepped onto the carriage heading south. A fresh, beautiful world, I am coming. It has been exactly 2 years since Sophie and I came to this new place. Now, Sophie is no longer my maid but like a sister in the family. We held hands to establish a firm foothold in Ye City. Although busy, I never stopped communicating with the others in the Marquis's manor and the Liu family. Master Liu always said he would either send people to help me or call people to bring me home. Not only that, he also scolded me, asking why I went out to live when life in the Marquis's manor was so good. However, I refused to return time and time again. As for my husband, he understood me, and I understood him even more. I knew clearly that if I just opened my mouth, he would definitely come to help me. Otherwise, he would definitely not interfere. Before coming to Ye City, I had returned the account books to my husband. I used the land my mother left me, sold it for money, and gathered all my saved gold and silver to set off towards a new horizon. As for choosing Ye City to live, it was because this place had a good climate and trade was quite developed. Above all, there were no rigid regulations like in the capital. Ye City had many merchants. Not only that, there were many people learning to be elegant. The first thing I acquired in Ye City was a few plots of land, followed by a few private shops. Originally, in the capital, stir-frying cooking methods were classified as highly popular. Whether in a restaurant or an ordinary roadside stall, we could taste what were called earthly delicacies. But in Ye City, I suddenly discovered there were no stir-fried dishes in their high-end restaurants. Therefore, I hired people to open a special restaurant dedicated to developing stir-fried dishes. Precisely because of us, everyone was mesmerized. That helped me earn a lot of money. After that, I started trading in oil. My business grew stronger day by day. We had to hire many more people to handle all the work. At this time, I suddenly realized that the people in Ye City seemed unaware that vegetables could be stir-fried to become dishes. From merchants in the market to poor people in remote rural areas of Ye City, they were all the same, unaware of the use of vegetables in daily meals. Suddenly, I remembered a sentence in an ancient book. To be an official in the court, one must know how to worry for the people. Living in a remote place, one should pay a little attention to the safety of the country. Therefore, I expressed a few of my thoughts in a letter sent to my husband. Unexpectedly, he praised me greatly, always encouraging me to confide in him, to tell him everything I had learned, witnessed, and experienced. As for when he would come to find me, he had not told me yet. Inherently, I was not in too much of a hurry. Days passed by in a rush. Sophie had also become more proficient in business, helping me manage the shops and the restaurant. But one day, a noble young master from the capital came to Yi City and visited my restaurant to dine. From then on, that young master appeared more and more frequently. From Sophie's words alone, I understood her feelings clearly. I went to the restaurant to wait. When that young master came to dine, I immediately went to greet him. Just as I predicted, their feelings were mutual. And that young master also spoke up. He wanted to ask a matchmaker to come to the house to propose to Sophie. This young master, besides being handsome and from the capital, was also the son of a high-ranking official with standing in the court. I saw the sparkling light in Sophie's smiling eyes and finally nodded in agreement to this marriage. I turned to the young master with only one request. In the future, you must treat Sophie sincerely. Absolutely do not let her suffer any injustice or grievance. Otherwise, our Sophie, with the backing of the Marquis' manor and the Liu family, will definitely force you to take responsibility for everything. The young man looked at Sophie with deep affection, his eyes overflowing with love. The day he returned to the capital, Sophie reluctantly said goodbye to me to return with him. However, peace did not stay with me for long. One beautiful day, someone came knocking at the door. It was a person I had not seen for a very long time. A person dressed simply but full of charisma, leaning on a cane, with a tall, good-looking figure. I promised I would come to find you, but I did not expect to be this late until today. He spoke while gently scratching his head with his hand. Then, we both laughed loudly. I happily welcomed him into the house. My husband made a few jokes, saying that thanks to my prosperous business, he could do whatever he wanted without needing to think. But I remembered the words my mother once said, "You are my flow." Only now could I understand the deep meaning in my mother's words, but I knew clearly I would not follow her words blindly. In reality, my mother's words were not wrong. She saw me as her flow so that the me of today could exist. But only now could I personally say that I am an endless stream in this world. The story ends here for now. If it touched your heart or left you thinking, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Please like, subscribe, and share Raccoon Tale to help more stories come to life. See you in the next tale.